So this is called Christian Financial Principles, or Matters. I'm glad you're here. And before we get too far into this, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. So I am not a lawyer, right? Everybody get that? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CPA. Well, I'm an inactive CPA. But I'm not a certified financial planner. I don't have any of that other than, like Mike said, I've got a fair amount of experience with this. Thanks to the 20 years that I've worked here at Compass Bible Church. Some of you in the crowd, I look at you and you've been in my office, and I'm grateful that you're here today because you've taught me things along the way as you've had financial difficulties and we've worked through that. But there you go. There's my disclaimer. So here's our normal schedule for these 6 events. We're going to go from about 10 to 11. It might be a little less, a little more. It won't be any longer than that. And then we'll have a Q&A. I'll take whatever questions that you want to take for, 10 or 15 minutes. It can be on any topic. Maybe we could kind of focus on the topic of the seminar because that might be the best way to approach this. But then after that, I'll hang around as long as anybody wants to talk, and we can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. And as always, I still have that email, as Mike said, even though I retired a while ago. I'm still here doing things that I love to do, and this is one of them, so you can email me anytime you want with any questions that may come up along the way. So the first topic we're going to deal with is stewardship. And I'll warn you right away, this is not going to be the practical, I do have practical things, but this is probably the most important session we're going to do because we're going to talk about stewardship and what that means. And I would really invite you to engage in this. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. If you saw our flyer, we're also going to talk about money and investments. We're going to talk about saving for college. Some of you I see might be in that age group. Some of you are not. You're already done with that. We're going to have a whole session on what I call retirement planning, things like that. We're going to look at Social Security and Medicare. If you're coming up on that and you're 55 or older, you should start doing your homework. But I'm going to have a whole thing on that. We're going to talk about qualified plans, like 401ks and 403bs, and we're going to talk about IRAs and Roth IRAs and IRA conversions to Roth, other things that you might want to think about along the way. We're going to talk about budgeting, not today. We're going to talk about income taxes. And just as a sideline, I hate paying any more income tax than I absolutely have to pay. So some of what I'm going to share with you is driven by the fact that if you did it this way, you would save income taxes. And if you saved income taxes, that gives you more money. If that gives you more money, that gives you more responsibility to be a good steward. And you might want to consider some of those tax savings, to give to people that are in need, or give to the church, or give to other entities. Can you hear me, Evie? No. Can everybody else hear me? Okay, I'm going to just go up a notch for Evie, because she said she couldn't hear me. So tell me if it's too loud, and we'll play with that. We're going to talk about some types of insurance. We're going to talk about creative ways to give. We're going to talk about borrowing money. We're going to talk about estate planning. We're going to talk about inheritance matters. We're going to talk about, so you want to be rich, right? So you want to be rich. And I thought about Fiddler on the Roof. Remember everybody see Fiddler on the Roof? And Tevye said, if I were a rich man. And so do you want to be rich? Is that why you're alive? Is that why you're on the planet? Is so you can be rich? So we'll talk about that. And then we have other topics. So today we're talking about stewardship. And what I have planned for the next 5 sessions, on December 13th, we'll be back in 120 West. And we'll talk about those retirement topics that I mentioned to you. When we get to January 10th, we're going to look at some estate planning and inheritance matters that I think would be helpful. On February 14th, we're going to do budgets and some other things. On March 21st, we're going to look at investing and debt and insurance. And then the last one is to be determined. So I may not get through all of these, and topics may come up. I have other things that I have in mind, and we'll see what that one looks like. But today we're going to talk about stewardship. And really what I want you to think about is, like, what is your worldview? Do you have a biblical worldview? Why are you here? What is the purpose of your life? And hopefully you're all born-again Christians. You've repented of your sin. You placed your faith and trust in Christ. And you want to be a good, faithful Christian in this world. Well, what does that look like when we start talking about stewardship matters? I have a quote here from Randy Alcorn. Many of you know him. He's written a lot of financial books. He's a good guy to read. This one in particular, I think, is useful. It's called The Treasure Principle. It's a small little book, see? So it's an easier read than some of the other books that you might find on that. I'd love 80% of this book. So the goal is read it and find out what the 20% is that Ricky T doesn't like. But there's some things in there that I don't like a lot. But one of the quotes that he has is, God sees our finances and our faith as inseparable. They're inseparable. There was a time when I used to say, show me your checkbook and I'll be able to figure out your level of commitment to Jesus Christ. I can't say checkbooks anymore because I don't think you all have checkbooks anymore. So give me your login to your Chase account and let me just run through your website, and I can tell where you spend your money maybe by how spiritually mature you are. And that's all that Randy Alcorn is saying here. There's another book that I really like a lot, and I'm not pushing all these to all of you to go out and buy today. This is called God and Money, and it's by John Cortines and Gregory Baumer. These guys were MBA students at Harvard, and they were solid Christian men, and they were nervous about their life because they knew when they graduated they were going to get a job making $250,000, $300,000 a year, and they didn't want wealth to sway them in their life, in their purpose. So they wrote this book, and they didn't slam anybody that came before them. Larry Burkett, Ron Blue, those are some guys that I grew up with. Randy Alcorn. In fact, Randy Alcorn does a recommendation for this book. But he says here that Scripture includes over 2,000 verses on wealth and money for a reason. Our handling of wealth is critical to our relationship with God. And, I think that is true. So my hope today is that when you leave here, you'll say, well, that wasn't very practical. Why did we do that? I hope you say that I view my life and my purpose as a Christian when it comes to income and wealth differently. I want you to view it the same way that God views it. So whenever we do this, we ought to go to the dictionary and say, well, what does stewardship mean? Well, Webster says it's the office, duties, and obligations of a steward. Don't you love that? The definition is the word that you still don't know. And I hated this in my English classes. You had to look these words up, and it takes you to another word, and then another word, and then another word. But it also goes on in the definition, the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. So that's how the world looks at this, that being a good steward or stewardship is you're going to have careful and responsible management of something that's been entrusted to you. I went to the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, and its definition of stewardship was the responsibility to manage all the resources of life for the glory of God, acknowledging God as your provider. So that's really what the first half of this we're going to talk about is, how do we do that? How do we manage all the resources of life for the glory of God, acknowledging God as our provider? So I wanted to ask you a question. What do you think of the resources God has given to you, or what are the resources God has given to you? What comes to your mind? So this is going to be the interactive part. When I say God's gifted you with resources, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Money. What else? Time? Health. What else? Family. What? Talent. What has God uniquely gifted you to do? Like for me, it's not to write papers. It's to do spreadsheets and financial statements and things like that. How about your life? God's given you your life and you want to steward it. So we're going to look at some passages, but here's just a preliminary list I have. He has entrusted you with the mysteries of God, right? If you're a Christian, he's entrusted you with the mysteries of God. And what are the mysteries of God? Well, one is, we read the Bible, Gentiles can be in God's family. And the mystery of that is what? The gospel. So you hear that all the time around here, but that's something that you're responsible for, is to share the gospel with other people. That's one of the reasons that you're here. That is certainly an attribute. Your lives, we talked about lives, we talked about family. So far you got all the ones on mine. We talked about health. We talked about relationships. I talk about the earth. Do we have to be crazy environmentalists? No. But do we have to treat this earth reasonably? Yes, we should. And income and assets, those are all of the ones that we've been over. So now I want to start looking at some passages. And I've not really got to anything on my outline yet. So I see some of you taking lots of notes, just to warn you. I haven't really got to anything yet. But 1 Corinthians 4, 1-2. This is how one should regard us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be faithful. So I'm hoping that you will be faithful with whatever God has given you to steward in your life. 1 Peter 4, 10-11. As each has received a gift, we talked about the gifts we've had, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks the oracles, whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies. If you're a men's Bible study leader, you need to serve with the strength that God will give you to supply in that ministry, in order that everything that God has given you may be glorified through Jesus Christ. That's the goal of your service, and to him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. So then, I'm not a Greek student, but I do have logos. So I took a look at what steward was, and there you go. It's 3621 if you look it up on your logos. But this is the Greek word that's used, and that's defined as to be a manager of a household. There's the household that we talked about. The position, work, responsibility, or arrangement of an administration, as of a house or property, either one's own or another. So when you're looking at the word in the Bible, the Greek word, this is what it means. And then there was a one just like it. And if you were Dr. John Goodrich, he would point out the difference between the first two words on this slide and the first two words on that slide. I know they look different, but in essence, it's really the same thing. To deal out, to distribute, to apportion. An administrator, a person who manages the domestic affairs of a family, a business, or a minor, a treasurer, a chamberlain of a city, a house manager, overseer, and steward. You guys get what we're talking about, right? Good. So again, when we share our faith, and we do the umbrella analogy to share our faith, it all starts with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which includes you and the unique qualities that you have. And then Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. So you are dwelling therein. You're the Lord's if you're committed your life to him. And so you are part of stewardship. So those are just, passages that support all the things that you guys already came up with on your list of what we steward. But now when we start looking at money, I want to remind you of at least these two verses. God in Haggai 2:8 says, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. He created them all. You could put in there money, investments, cryptocurrency, whatever you think you have. Remember that God created that, And then Deuteronomy 8:18, you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers as it is this day. So a lot of you I know, you're highly successful in your field of endeavor. You make a lot of money. Some of you don't make very much money at all. But whatever money you have, the only reason you have it, the only reason you have your job, the only reason you have your profession, the only reason you have your retirement, the only reason for all of this is the Lord your God gave you the power to get the wealth. That's the only reason you have it. And when you get to my age and you start looking around, you say, well, I wonder why that guy's worth $200 million and this guy's worth this and I'm not worth any of that. We do these horizontal things and we need to stop doing that. But really, I just wanted to remind you that it's God that allowed you to be where you are today. It was God that gave you that intellect. And this goes counterculture, right? I mean, when you go to seminars, I don't know what industry you're in, and they put up this industry head, and they tell you all the schools that he went to, and all the experience he has, and every previous position he has, which uniquely allows him to do whatever he's doing. We're puffing up men, right? It's God that allowed that to happen. And it's God that allows that to happen in your life. I'm still on this God owns everything kick. So I want to keep doing this because it's just so persuasive. And I've got verses I didn't include. But you remember Matthew 25, 14, and 15. This is the parable of the talents. And he gave somebody 5, he gave another 2, he gave another 1. And what did they do with it? Somebody used their talents, their gifts, and they produced 5 more. And the other one produced 2 more, and the other one didn't do anything with their talent. And these are some of the other things that we have, the unique attributes that God's given you to share the gospel, to be productive in ministry. That's the purpose of it, but what kind of illustration does he use? He uses one of money. And so I'm almost done with this, and I'll give you the first point, but I also want you to have the right perspective about stewardship. So 1 Timothy 5:8, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So, for the men out there, it's your responsibility, and the women sometimes, if you're a single mom, it's your responsibility to provide for the members of your household and your relatives. And if you don't, it's worse than an unbeliever. So we do have a responsibility when God gives us income and wealth to make sure that we're doing that, right? So even though we're going to talk a little bit about giving in a minute and how you're stewarding everything that you have, remember one of your primary responsibilities is to take care of your family and to do it in a good and godly and well way. Then he reminds us in Timothy, same book, 6:8, but if we have food and clothing, with this we should be content. So if you have a lot of wealth and a lot of income, praise the Lord. If you have none, but you have food and clothing, I might add shelter, but God didn't add that, so I can't add it. But with these, you should be content. You should be content with those. So now we can get to point number 1 after that big, long introduction. Be good stewards of what God has entrusted to you. So we had that earlier list. You thought about all the things. You had everything that I had in that category. So my exhortation to you this morning is to be good stewards of that. God's entrusted you with it. I think I've demonstrated that he wants you to be good stewards, and that is something that's important. Point number 2, I'll give this to you up front, so you don't have to wonder what my point is. If that's our paradigm, right? When I get a bonus at my work, I look at it and I say, why did I get this? And what do I do with it? And many years, my wife and I said, oh, that gave us more money to give to God. That's why I got the bonus. So I want you to honor God by excelling at giving. So we're going to spend a little bit of time now looking at some what do I have? A through G on how we can do that or what we need to think about. So the first little subpoint under giving is A, Christians need to give. Christians need to give. A lot of times when people ended up in my office over the last 20 years and I asked them for a budget and we worked on a budget and there was no giving at all, I thought, what are you thinking? Maybe that's why you're in the trouble that you're in, is that you don't give. So if you're a Christian here today, you need to give. And now I'm going to go through some verses that are going to support that you should be giving. One of the classics, Matthew 6, 19 to 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How many of you seen wealthy people explode because they're spending all their time on their money? That's all they're not Christians, but they get a lot of money, they get egotistical. Why are we laying up treasures on earth? We should be laying up treasures in heaven. And that goes for the treasure of serving and loving others and making sure your HFG person who just lost their job has food to eat. It isn't solely money, but everything we do, we should be laying up treasures in heaven. And think about it. I had a friend of mine, he invested $300,000 in crypto, somebody stole it, and he didn't have all the paperwork in order for him to be able to prove that it was his. Poof, it's gone. It's gone. So he was laying up treasures on earth so he could get a good return and make a good investment, and it disappeared on him. So if he had been laying up treasures in heaven, those will never disappear on you. So every Christian should give. Matthew 6:24, under the same category. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And I'm here to tell you, you can't do it. If your main purpose in life is to serve money, this is not going to end well for you. God does not want you to do that. He wants you to serve God. Philippians 4, 16 to 20. It's an acceptable sacrifice. Paul's writing here to the Philippians, and he says, even in Thessalonica, you sent me help for my needs once and again. So he's thanking them, the Philippians, for sending him support so he could do his work and do his job. Not that I seek the gift. Paul's pretty transparent. But I seek the fruit that will increase to your credit. So he's reminding them that there's going to be fruit in their life because they were willing to sacrifice a little bit and make sure they gave to the work of Paul. I've received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. So when we give, there are sacrifices that are acceptable and pleasing to God. Leviticus 27:30. Every tithe of the land, whether the seed of the land or of the fruit of the trees, is the Lord's. It's holy to the Lord, which is why when we're here and you're giving like money to the church, we try to be very careful with how we spend that money because we know, in essence, it's holy. And we have an obligation to spend it and to spend it right. Item number B, give to God first. You should give to God first. If you come into my office with your personal budget and the top line isn't giving, I guess it could be at the bottom. I don't know where you put it. If it's not there at all, then there's a problem. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. And this one has a promise. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. No, I haven't joined Benny Hinn's ministry, who used to be up here in the corner. This is not a prosperity gospel message. You give me 1,000, God will give you 5,000 in the next 5 months. I'm not saying that. But Proverbs is saying there is some correlation with how generous you are with what you will have in your life. So would you give to God first? And then give consistently. You're familiar, I hope you're familiar with all these, but Paul wants you to give consistently. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the church of Galatia, so you also are to do. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. Giving consistently. Now he says once a week. How many of you give once a week? Okay, well you're probably paid once a week. Or maybe you just decide you're going to give once a week. A lot of us are paid every 2 weeks, and so then I would say in our culture, maybe you give every 2 weeks. Or you're paid on the 15th and the end of the month, that's when you should give. It should be first fruits, it should be every time, all the time. Maybe you're paid once a month, and you should give once a month. Some of you, maybe you're paid once a year. And you're going to say, Rick, that's crazy. That doesn't happen. And I'm here to tell you it does. Some people, they have their own business. They take a small little salary along the way. They don't really know what they made till they get to the end of the year. And then, boom, we get a big gift. And we're grateful for all of that. Some of you may know my history. I work for one of the largest private real estate development companies in Southern California. And I was let go before I started a home building company with a couple other guys. But I had 18 months where we had no income. So I went home and I said, okay, kids, your allowances are cut. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do this. And I thought, I don't need to give because I don't have any income. And then we did that for a couple months and we felt like this is wrong. This is wrong. We had like 18 months of money saved for a rainy day. And so we started giving on what we were spending. And we cut everything down because I was unemployed. And we just felt like we weren't doing it consistently. Those are personal things. You can deal with that. But the charge here is to give consistently. Give every week. Give every 2 weeks. Give whenever you're paid. Give when you get the bonus, if you possibly can. Give proportionately. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. This is a long passage. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. So this is more the relationship with you and somebody else. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same. But love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High God. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Luke 6:38, where he wraps this up, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put back into your lap. For the measure you use it will be measured back to you. So if you're generous, God is going to be generous with you. So give proportionally. It's a little clearer here. So in Acts 11, 29 to 30, so the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. So we need to give proportionally. I guess that's number D, or letter D. Some of you can give very little because of the circumstances that you're in. Some of you are giving faithfully 10%. Some of you may be giving 20%. Some may be giving 25%. I've known people that have said, in my life, we're going to give 25% of our income. That's just what we're going to do because it's proportional. Famous pastor in South County used to give 10% until he sold a bunch of books, and then he flipped it. He gives 90% and lives on the 10%. You can come up with every rule you want, but if God has blessed you beyond what is normal, you should give proportionally. Oh, now we're at generously. Give generously here. 2 Corinthians 8, 1-7, which is, the classic passage on giving generously. Paul's talking to the Corinthians. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. Can you imagine that? That Paul's sitting there, and somebody from Macedonia comes up and says, just let me give. I beg you, let me give. I want to give it to you so you can take it and you can meet the needs of these people. I'm begging you, let me give. That's the mindset that Paul has. I beg you to let me do this. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, which I've said at the beginning, give yourself first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us, Paul. Accordingly, we urge Titus that as he has started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, in faith, speech, and knowledge, and all earnestness, and in love for you, see that you excel in this act. So here's the charge to be generous. Proverbs 11:24. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Again, not a prosperity gospel, but it is a true concept inside of the church of God. I want you to be a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9, 6-7, Paul's talking to the Corinthians again. And he's saying the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. He loves a cheerful giver. Paul doesn't say, do you see where he says give 10%? Does you see where it's 8%? Half of what you make, a quarter of what you make? There's nowhere in the New Testament that you're going to find a percentage. Old Testament, yes. They had tithes. They had offerings. And if you heard from Pastor Mike, when he talks about this, you add all those up, it's well over 20%. So if you walk up to me and say, man, I'm so happy I get to tithe 15%. I'm going to go, I don't think you want to call it a tithe. Because if you want to call it a tithe, we're talking 23, 25%. I've seen some of these guys, right? When you add up all the taxes, they had a temple tax, they had all these taxes that added up to probably close to 30%. So don't use tithe around me because I'll freak out. But the idea is you should be a cheerful giver. So whatever you take away from this point, right? Clearly I'm making a point that, why we should be giving. If you can't do it with a happy heart and you can't be content, then don't give. Don't give. Really, you shouldn't give. And if you decide yourself or with your spouse or with your family, whatever you're doing, I'm going to give 8% or 5%, be happy about it. We used to say when the bags are passed, which we still do, I don't know how long we're going to do that, as people drop their offering in, there should be laughter. Because people are so happy, like the begging, right? The begging, they're thrilled to be able to do that. And I'm telling you, as part of the charge to give, you should be very content and happy with what you give. There should be no, okay, 10%. What am I going to do with the rest? You should be happy with what you give. You with me on that? Okay. Deuteronomy 15:10 says the same thing. You should give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in all that you undertake. So we see it in the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament, and then we've already gone over this. Paul's saying you should excel at this. And you're constantly told, excel at Bible study, excel at evangelism, excel at praying, excel at interacting with people, excel at taking care of people. Paul is calling the Corinthians to excel in the grace of giving. So I don't know if you think about that. I want to be the best giver God has ever had in his kingdom. And that doesn't mean a lot of money, right? Because it's all proportional. But am I willing to sacrifice? Okay, we're going to talk about ways to give. Now we're going to get to the practical things. One way to give, money. Everybody knew that when I came in, right? So you can give online, recurring giving. We've made it super easy. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but it didn't do it. I thought I'd be able to get to my homepage, the Compass Bible Church homepage. But, oh, Ricky T, this is one thing I didn't check. There we go. You can give online. We make it easy. You go to our homepage. There's a give. You go to the give. First thing you see is one-time or recurring giving. And you know what? 80% of you do that. So thank you very much. You've already figured that out. I'm not sure we need to talk too much more about that one, but it is available. You can mail in a check. And some of you do that. You get on your bill pay. You mail us a check. It comes in the mail. We put it in a safe. Once a week, we have volunteers come in. They open the envelope, and they account for it all. They take it to the bank. Actually, we scan the checks in. They take the cash to the bank, and you can use your bill pay. You could do wire transfers. I have a friend that just says, oh, I see that you have a brokerage account at Morgan Stanley. Can I just wire money from my Morgan Stanley account into yours? I said, sure. We try to make that easy. But money's the first one. Appreciated stock. Now, I've got a separate little PowerPoint on this, but I'm just going to give you a little teaser. If you happen to be an investor in common stock or preferred stock or anything that's readily tradable on any of the exchanges, you should think about giving appreciated stock because it's great for you. It's great for you. Lots of tax benefits of that. Keep the money from Gavin Newsom and federal government. Crypto is, in the IRS world, it's the same as stock. So on our homepage, there's a little give crypto. That'll take you to a third-party spot, and you can give crypto. If you paid $100 for something that's worth $100,000 today, you could give us one of your coins, and you can deduct all of that at $100,000, and you recognize no gain. You never pay tax on it. So you give us crypto, QCDs. Who's over 70 and a half? A couple of you. When you get to 7 and a half, there's this thing called a qualified charitable distribution. And if you have any retirement money in an IRA, this is a beautiful thing. You can give through bequests. We could be in your estate plan. I know somebody handed out those guide to gives. You can take those, Compass Giving Guides. I really just wanted to put them in the back if you wanted to look at those. But we're going to have a whole thing on retirement, but it'd be great if we were in your estate plan or your retirement plan or your life insurance. Those are ways to give. Some of you may have donor advised funds. I'm going to talk about that in a future session, of what a donor advised fund is. Real estate. You can give us real estate. We've had 4 pieces of real estate given to Compass Bible Church over the last 20 years. 40 acres in San Diego. 40 acres. Dude, that sounds good. Well, there were no roads to it. There's no utilities to it. There's no water, electrical, or power. You can't really get to it in the rainy season. But it was 40 acres. And the donor got a deduction for the full fair market value when he donated it to us. And then we decided to hold on to it because what happens with real estate? It always goes up. We finally disposed of it. But somebody gave us 40 acres in San Diego County, out in the boondocks. We had somebody give us 2 homes in Irvine. One in Irvine, one in Garden Grove. We had somebody give us a condo, free and clear. So we go and we find an agent and we say, would you sell this for us? And they sell it for us and we end up with all the proceeds and they end up with great tax advantages. So that's just a way to give. We'll talk more about that at another time. There's some complicated options that I'm not going to go over today. The charitable remainder trust, retained life estates, charitable lead trust. I've heard of people saying, I'll give you 10% of my company because it's God's company. It's like your house is God's house. So if I make $1 million, you make $100,000. That's something that we would look at. Ryan would look at that. I would look at that and say, well, okay, we're happy to take an interest in your business. We don't want your liabilities. So some of this, even the land that we got, we had to look at it to make sure it wasn't a, environmentally problem for us. But people do that. If you have a partnership, you can make us a partner in your partnerships. There are some IRS implications of all of that. Okay, item 4, ways not to give. See, I'm being honest here now. These are ways to give, these are ways not to give. Please don't give us through Venmo or Zelle or any other electronic way, because what those institutions do is they drop it in our bank account, and it's like, sometimes the background information, it's like, who gave this to us? And so it causes a lot of difficult back of house accounting things that we have to deal with. We really don't want your vehicles or your boats. On our homepage, there's a way to give your vehicle if you want. It's called Cars to Charities or something. They take a big chunk out of whatever they sell it for. They just take it. You say you want to give it to us, they'll come and pick it up. They take it, they sell it. They give us the proceeds after their exorbitant fees and everything else. Deb and I have just gave vehicles to people that needed them, right? They just need them. But it's really hard for us to do a vehicle or a boat. If you have $1 million boat, come talk to me. I would say, why don't you sell it, enter into a sales agreement, and then 2 days before you close, give it to us, and then we'll sell it to the same buyer, and we'll accomplish the same thing. But I mean, we don't know what to do with a boat. All we're going to do is sell it anyway, because we don't have boat people. We're not real excited about foreign currency because there's exchange rates, and we walk down to the Bank of America and we show them, here's somebody donated this to us, and they're like, well, okay, we got to handle that differently, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. And some of you even give us coins, and it's like, we don't even know what it is. So there's a volunteer account team that counts the offering every week. They come in Mondays. There's about 6 different people rotated all the time, and they've got a little envelope that they put all the coins in, because we really can't do much with your pesos or your whatever it is. We really don't want your timeshare, right? Because that's a liability, not an asset. And really, things that are of little or no value, we can't use them. So here's some more practical observations. We would like you to give to the church first, because that's what I think God has called you to do. I said first. We'll talk about that in a minute. How much? I've talked to you about how much, right? It's whatever you decide before the Lord to give. That's the call for you as a Christian to do. And I think I made my case in the giving section that we went over today. So you're not going to hear from me, should it be 10% of my gross check or 10% of my net check? Because you may make $100 an hour, but guess what happens to that? I know what happens to that. Social Security and Medicare and SDI, and they charge me for my health insurance, and I got my 401k contribution in there, and I've got, you know what happens between gross and net. So do you give on your gross, or do you give on your net? That's something you get to struggle with. It's not something for me to tell you what to do, but you'll stand before God someday and answer that question. How often? We've talked about that. Parachurch organizations, I said you should give to the church first. But there are some parachurch organizations like Compass Bible Institute and Compass Church Planting Association, which helps us, plant churches. Focal Point Radio Ministries. We all want you to go on the cruise. Sign up for the cruise in September of next year. Go on the cruise. Enjoy Pastor Mike's teaching and all the things that a cruise will do for you, because Focal Point makes a little bit of money on that if they get enough people to sign up. So sign up. Parachurch organizations are not discussed in the Bible. When Paul is telling people to go and share the gospel, he never says, well, set up a homeless shelter while you're there, or set up this or this or this. He tells you to take care of your neighbors and to love your neighbors and to put them before yourself. The church should be handling all of that. But the history of these are that there's lots of little churches all over the place, and they want to send a missionary, but their budget wouldn't allow to send one missionary anywhere. But if they band together, right, if you get 100 churches that do a little bit, then maybe we can have a missions organization. And that's really kind of how they started. And I think those are great. You should consider doing that. My daughter and son-in-law went to Vietnam, sponsored by Compass Bible Church and his home church. And we gave to that. So there's nothing wrong about giving to some of these parachurch organizations. You should give to God first, and then you can talk about that. And then I would say be very careful. Make sure you know a lot about these organizations that you're giving to. You can find their IRS tax form online anytime you want. Guidestar.org. So if you've heard of the Rick Talcott Orphanage in Africa, and you want to see what our revenues are and our expenses are and what my salary is, you can go to guidestar.org, recently bought by a company called Candid, C-A-N-D-I-D. You can go there, do a little registration, and you can look at anybody's tax return. It's called a Form 990, and all the information about that institution is there. You can look that up. So you ought to be careful if you want to give to, after you've taken care of all the obligations you've had to your church, and you want to give more to parachurch organizations, you should do that. We even do that here. What do we have? Short-term missions projects. Who's going to Guatemala? Guatemala on the 18th. There we go. We got a couple of you raising your hand. And did you send letters to people in the church saying, would you support me? And Compass Bible Church says, you should respond to those. You should respond to those. And if you're going and you haven't sent me a letter, that's a mistake that you've made. Because my wife and I usually respond to every request that we get. Don't tell everybody that. I'll tell you that. But one summer when my kids were of the age of going to Mexico and building houses down at the church in San Clemente and others, we would get these letters all the time. It's like, well, we don't know that person. I don't know. Should we give? I don't know. How are we going to do this? And we wanted a framework, so we said, we're just going to give to everybody. And we were nervous because, like, what if 100 people came in and asked us for money? Not sure we do that all the time, but parachurch organizations are great, right? You should give most of what you give to the church, and then you should be very, very careful. A lot of these don't even have the right gospel. And so you don't want to give to them. Many of you, whether you know it or not, your employers will match what you give to a charitable institution. And we have several of those. So people have money taken out of their checkbook or their check at Costco, and Costco matches it, so we get bang for the buck. You give me $100, they give me $100, we get $200. So if you're working for a large employer, you should look into it. Now, some employers are not like all the other employers. Some employers say, we don't give to religious institutions. I don't know why they do that, other than they hate the church, they hate what we do. But many of them, you might be surprised. I've got up to the very end and had to sign a document on one of them, and I couldn't sign it because there were restrictions on the religious institution for taking that match. And I actually called somebody on the phone, and they said, well, I'm sure you give money. You probably have a homeless outreach, or you have this type of outreach to somebody, and you should take it because it's okay. It's okay. And I said, we do that, but we don't have a ministry that does that, so we declined. to get the match because it just wasn't right. So maybe your employer has an employer match, maybe they don't. But all these employers, they want to get kudos from the culture that all of our employees are involved in the community and they give to the United Way. I remember working at a big HCPA firm and they had a United Way drive, and basically my boss says, we want every employee to give the United Way. And I'm like, I don't want to give the United Way. I give to my church. But I think I gave him $10 because I also didn't want to get thrown out. But do employer match. Okay, I'm going to leave you with these two verses today that I don't think we've talked about yet. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. In Hebrews 13:16, do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for your sacrifices are pleasing to God. So we're going to end there, but I wanted to do stewardship first because everything else we talk about in your financial world, all those other topics that we're going to go over the next 5 months, if you haven't got this one right, the others don't really matter in your life. And these are hard things. These are things that my wife and I have to revisit, kind of all the time, just like you guys revisit all the time. Things change. So let me pray for you, and then we will move into the Q&A. And you can ask me questions, and then we'll really end it. And then if you just want to hang out, I'm here to answer questions too. The future ones are you walk away feeling maybe a little more satisfied on practical things to do. But this is the most important thing for you to do, is to get this right in your life. All right, let's pray. God, thank you that we have your word, that it tells us exactly what we should do. 2 Peter reminds us that everything we need for life and godliness, you've granted that to us. And we're thankful for that. Even on some of these hard topics about, even money, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to get down and do the dirty work. But God, we want to be pleasing to you. We want to set in our minds so that we give consistently, proportionately, generously. We want to be cheerful givers. We want to give to you first, then we want to excel at this. It's just another Christian principle in our life that we want to get a handle on. Help us to do that. We ask you by the power of the Holy Spirit that you would guide and direct us as we read and we think and we contemplate, that we could honor you in everything that we do. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.